Kia ora, and welcome to Constellations and All That. I'm your host, Tracy Cartwright, and together we will be exploring the world of family constellations with facilitators and clients from around the world, looking at different perspectives and experiences in the work, having a cup of tea and just chatting with some friends around their experiences in constellations. We'd love for you to join us. I hope that you enjoy this series as much as I have loved making it. Kia ora everyone, welcome to Constellations and All That. Today I have the utmost pleasure of chatting with Suzi Tucker. Welcome, Suzi.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here, Tracy.
I don't know if you've listened to too many of my podcasts, but the way I roll is I don't introduce you as in giving your credentials, but I invite you to please share a little bit about yourself for the listeners and the viewers.
I love that, actually, because, you think of yourself differently at different times in your life. And every time I do a podcast, I think, oh, that's what I want to emphasize, or that's what I want to emphasize. Or anyway, so I like to tell people, and I think I'm borrowing this phrase from somebody else, actually, that I came to Constellation, I would describe accidentally, as I think most people sort of have, right? I don't think when I was a little girl, somebody asked me what I wanted to do. I don't believe I said I want to go into family constellations. But I met Bert as a publisher and as an editor. And so I have to say most of my early learning was over dinner. And I didn't realize what an extraordinary privilege that was until sort of late in the game. And now I think, whoa, I am one lucky woman. And I take that seriously. But anyway, so I started working with him. He actually gave me a little piece of paper. It was actually a napkin that said the Bert Hellinger Institute USA on a little napkin many years ago, probably in 2000, I want to say. So I've been doing this work in one form or another, or in many forms, since about 2000.
Wow. And was what he wrote on the napkin, was that his institute or yours, or what he was seeing for you?
Mine,
Wow.
right? So like such a Hellinger thing, especially in the early days, I think, go out and do it, right? Go out and take the work and do it. And that kind of let many flowers bloom mentality that he had, with the help of, and I know Raquel Schlosser also mentions his name, and I think I will mention it as well because his name is a little bit lost. But I would not say with the help, I would say with the absolute determination and tenacity of Harald Hohnen, we started something in the United States. I don't think I know I would not have done it on my own. I know that.
Okay, yeah, and his name is really just, for me, just starting to circulate. So I'd love to know a little bit more about him, but also, and I'll put that here. First of all, I know that you're a publisher, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, because you've been instrumental in printing and releasing a lot of really important information.
Yeah, so I'll give you another name, because really I got to ride a lot of coattails when I was younger. And I would say that I have developed my own coattails now. But certainly in the beginning, so I had a publishing company. I stepped away from it because I just got too busy to do it. What a wonderful reason. But I had started it with a man named Jeffrey K. Zeig. And Jeff is a Ericksonian therapist, very well known across the globe. And he is the reason that Bert Hellinger's work is published in the United States. So I like to tell the story because it strikes me as sort of amusing that when I first got a partial manuscript from Bert, and I think it was really just the transcript of one constellation, I said, well, absolutely not. We cannot, but we were kind of a mainstream, small, independent publisher. I said, we can't publish this. It's not appropriate for. And Jeff said to me, and he never said anything to me about editorial matters. He said to me, would you look at it again, please? He said, I know this man traveling in the same circles, teaching. And also, Bert was very, very interested in Ericksonian hypnotherapy. And you see it in his work. So I said, okay, I'll take another look at it. Proceeded to work for the next year on Love's Hidden Symmetry, mostly with Hunter Beaumont, who has now died, much to my shock. But anyway, and with Guntard Weber, but really mostly with Hunter. And then we kind of worked on what I would say we published the core books. So Love's Hidden Symmetry, which I like to tell people my publisher mistakenly called Love's Hidden Cemetery.
It's a faux pas, isn't it?
It is. And I began to correct him. And I said, well, sort of, actually. And acknowledging what is, and love's own truths, and supporting love, and a bunch of all the early videos that Hunter and Bert. So thank heavens, or thank somebody or other, that Jeff Zeig said to me, hey, Suzi, would you look at this again?
Yeah,
and
important stuff.
Important stuff. And then I kind of look back and I sort of think, well, maybe I was hesitant because something in me knew everything's going to change for me. That there was just this little bit of, this is different. This feels different,
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah. And Jeff is still, around teaching.
And so I didn't realize you did videos as well. I knew that you published books.
Yeah, I published, other videos of Erickson and stuff, but there's a, 6-volume set called, there's Healing Love and Holding Love, and a fabulous, fabulous conversation with Bert Hellinger, Rupert Sheldrake, and Madame Schützenberger, I think that's how you say her name. Just an extraordinary, extraordinary conversation called Reviewing Assumptions. So the early, his early output was just, foundational, just foundational. And it was like, he had this energy, he just had to get it down and out. And it was a fun time to be working with him.
Wow, that's really cool. And they are available to purchase? They
are. You go to the Milton H. Erickson Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. What are you up to now? I know that you've got a busy schedule ahead of you. You're going to be with Leslie, and you said
I do things like the West Coast Intensive, and I do Omega Institute every summer. It's a little home away from home. I now go to the Bahamas in the summer, in January, actually. So I do some of that stuff. I really love to teach. And so I'm just beginning my new art and practice, which is a 16-month exploration, pretty intense. People are pretty serious who do it, part on Zoom, part in person. So I'll start that in August. I do a lot of teaching. I do experiential conversations probably every third weekend on a theme. So I do love to kind of, it's like when people would come to me as authors and they would have a paradigm, right? They would EMDR or NLP or whatever their paradigm was. I would always say to them, start with the theme, let your title be the theme, and then let your paradigm be the subtitle. Right. So in the experiential conversations, that's sort of my idea. Like I know that people have questions about money or relationship or adoption, or so I go by the theme. And then the lens is just my lens. So I do that very regularly. And I do some supervision teaching as well. So, and writing. That's my great love.
Yeah.
That's my great love.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So if anyone that's listening is wanting to join you in the West Coast or Omega, how would they find you for that?
Just go to my my website. It's got everything. So it's Suzi Tucker, Suzi Tucker, TUCKER.com.
Brilliant. How do you, if you're having a conversation with someone and they've never heard of constellations before, how do you describe it? What would be your elevator pitch as such?
Kind of, it changes a little bit, but I have to say, I always have this remarkable experience of people knowing what I'm talking about before it's fully out of my mouth.
Wow.
Right. And I had this like one moment, I was literally on a Starbucks line, and for some reason it was very crowded. And the woman in front of me sort of said, I don't know why, but she sort of said, so what are you doing today? We were near Lincoln Center. I think that's why she asked me, because she was going to Lincoln Center. And I said, well, I teach something called Family Constellation. And she, of course, said what many people said. She said, oh, like the stars, astrology. And this is the first time I ever said that. Now I've said it a million times. I said, well, it's a little bit like if I pulled the stars out of the sky and planted them in the dirt. I said, I'm really looking at the root system of the individual and how it is nested in the larger root system and how those two things inform each other. And then I just said, 5 generations back, the choices people made, and often the choices they didn't make, get us caught up in a language that by the time it gets to us, we don't know the reasons why, but we speak the language. And she looked at me and she said, She said, like, would secrets be inappropriate? And I started laughing and I said, well, obviously you have been to a workshop. Yes, secrets are often very important because it's where the language becomes obscure. And somewhere in the generations, there's a reason for that. But we experience the impact without knowing the reasons.
I love that description. Yeah.
Thank you. And as I say, I really kind of, again and again, I'll be talking to somebody. I was talking to somebody at a conference once, and she said to me, she asked me what I did, and she said to me, she was a therapist. And she said to me, she gave me whatever her issue would be. I said, I said, are you Jewish? And she said, yes, I knew her name. And I said, well, imagine, and I just gave her an image. I just said, imagine that your great grandfather is over there, right? He's just over there. I mean, we can talk about, 80 years ago, or we can talk about time, or I can say he's just over there. And you have some sort of bond with him that lives in your body and not in your mind. And so I'm looking over here, at her great grandfather, and I turn to her, and her mascara is completely running down her face based on an image that I am surfacing. I'm not creating. All right. I'm not creating it. I'm just bringing it to the surface. And now she has this connection between the challenge that she has always, the right to, or the ability to follow through, or whatever it is. And now she has a deep logic beyond the logic. I always think like this logic is real and deep and I can work with. I can't work with the logic that just says, oh, I must be an idiot, or, oh, I did it again. I'm
Yeah.
so lazy. Or all of those internal ideas that we can beat ourselves up for, but we can't really do anything about.
And the more you beat yourself up, the more you repeat them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You go into that tunnel, right?
Do you have any like really standout moments, memories for your time with Bert? Like you said, you were privileged to share many dinners with him, and I don't know, or something that you may have witnessed, or we'll start there. Yeah, we'll start there.
Two things come to mind. One, I can really see where I am. We're having breakfast and we're in Chelsea in New York City. And I'm hosting him at a place called Covenant House, which was a place that took in runaways and kids really in trouble, and a lot of LGBT, a lot of gay, trans kids who just had nowhere to be, kicked out of their families and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's where I hosted him. And we're having breakfast. And I asked him if he had ever been afraid. Something was going on, I think, in his world that was, people had kind of turned on him for something. And he seemed so peaceful. And he said, yes, I was afraid when I was a teenager and surrounded by war. And I knew that that level of terror would probably never be in my life again. So that really stood out for me because it kind of told me again where this work really comes from on that gut level. How do we reconcile the unfathomable?
Yeah. What a beautiful
Right.
question too. So were you going to work with the teenagers, or that was just where they hung out? Wow.
We rented space, and
Yeah.
the money went to support Covenant House. Although many of the teenagers, they were serving the food and
Yeah.
baking the food and
Yeah.
all of that for us. And it was really fun because I would sit on stage with Bert and I would notice them lingering, watching. It was
Mm,
quite a thing, quite a thing. And I was very nervous about it because I knew it wasn't the beautiful spaces he was used to. And he walked into that space and he looked around and he said to me, I love it. So that really stands out to me. And then it stands out to me that he was with me, I guess is maybe the way I would put it. The last time I hosted him was 2008. And my husband was dying at that time. It was just yesterday, just yesterday.
mm,
And there was something about continuing to do the work and feeling Bart, who was my husband, there and feeling the kind of planting seeds for the future, and Bert's personal kindness and care in that space among 500 people that he just had. He had the attention, I think, of an emergency room doctor. He could give you 5 seconds, but was so there for that 5 seconds that it felt,
yeah.
he had that ability. So I am grateful, again, sort of in retrospect, not realizing how fortunate I was to have his good company during that time.
Yeah.
So those are the things
Well,
that stand out today.
thank you for sharing that. And
Yes, of course.
yeah, I can feel the tenderness in that too. So I usually do this on the fly. So and here's me talking to a well-established writer, presenter, publisher, and I'm just winging it. This is how
That's the way to do it, is to wing it.
it's
Do you
how I
know
work.
when I do a presentation, we're probably very similar in this way. When I do a presentation, I write often before it, but then I don't even know where what I've written is, right? And I always say, my assistants laugh at me because I always say I have great anxiety that I'm going to open my mouth and nothing's going to come out. But my sense is, particularly as a writer, but as a speaker as well, that there's this line of women behind me who couldn't, who would be hung or drowned or institutionalized or silenced somehow. And that when I open my mouth, I am speaking with them.
Yeah.
Like, and that really is very, anyway, I like that feeling of deep accompaniment, and also the sense that I have the privilege to be able to speak and to write, to even put my name to things, to have a voice. So I suppose I do things on the fly as well, but sort of not alone. I think we're not alone.
Yes, this work has taught me, for me, I felt most of my life in my experiences, but yeah, I love that how unalone I feel having met this work and recognizing the things that were there, that were always there, but being able to give them a place. So yeah, and I love
And
that.
also taking your place, right? I mean, I think of you doing this, and I think for somebody who has felt alone to be willing and able, and maybe it's a lesson you didn't ask for, but being particularly well positioned to take the lead. And as you take the lead, we all follow you in a certain way.
Yeah, thank you. I get that. I love when I listen to you because I've popped in and out of some of your teachings over the years, as you may remember. And there's always the way you speak, I always get so much from it. Like, even just sharing your story about the woman standing behind you, there's so much in that small, brief sentences, but there's always a much bigger, for myself, there's always something very big and what's the word? Usually a nugget in there.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Where are your ancestors?
So on my father's side, they're Hungarian. And on my mom's side, going way back, they're Welsh and Irish and English. But her greats, right, her grands and her greats were in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. A lot of poverty, a lot of farmers and coal miners and that kind of thing. I always think, it's so interesting when we think about trauma and we think about, wars and all of that. And my father's side is more obvious in a certain way. He came from a Jewish family. He married a Catholic woman. His father married a Catholic woman, but a Jewish family in Hungary. So we know pogroms, and also very successful in Hungary, but a kind of more obvious history. But, it was a long time before I started thinking about my mom, and thinking about one of the first stories she ever told me was that she and her sister and her parents lived in a car in New York City for several months. They drove from Indiana, and they lived in this car, and they were taken in eventually by the Salvation Army. Part of the reason she told me was because she always gave money to the people ringing the bells at Christmas of the Salvation Army. And I thought that was sort of interesting because of her relationship with religion and whatever. And she said, "Oh, but they took us in." And I have such a sense of, what had they not? So she's very proud of her Welsh background. I'm quite convinced that it's because it was the most obscure. People knew the least about Wales, and she really liked that idea. She really loved that idea. Well, one day, because Wales was such a sort of fantasy for her, I really want to, I teach actually. I'd love to do some workshops in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, England, just to kind of go to her territory. And I do a little teaching. Got this wonderful, fabulous opportunity to do some online teaching, and we're talking about doing it in person with a Bulgarian group. So that's a little bit for my father. this woman reached out and she said she was Bulgarian, and we spoke, and she's delightful and wonderful. But also I noticed myself kind of go, oh, I'll do that. And then I thought, right, because it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from Hungary.
So if anyone's listening and they're in Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and you'd like to host Suzi,
Do you know, I didn't travel for years. I didn't travel for years because this sounds so terribly sad, but when my husband died, I hated to leave home. It sounds counterintuitive, but when he was alive, I loved to leave because I loved to come back. When he died, I had this strange experience of I didn't like to leave because I hated coming back. So it's only been, maybe 5 years where I've become quite the little traveler. So I never went to Bernried. I kind of did not have the experience that some folks have had. I know I missed out on a bunch of things, but that's the way it is.
I've just had Bill Mannell here in Aotearoa for our conference, and he was telling me about Bernried, and I was like, oh, so many people that talk about it. It just sounds like an amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
We never know what we're going to create in this world that is just as amazing.
Totally. I think that's right.
So on your journey with you've worked alongside Bert, you've learnt from Bert. Who else would you say would be some of the influential teachers for you in this work?
So then you put that on at the end. Some of the influential teachers for me. So everybody teaches from their system, right? I think they're guided by, so you have the very spiritual teachers, or you have the, people were guided by our own systems to some extent. So I am really guided by the writers. And I really take, Bert is right behind me. He's in front of my mother and father, kind of in my image, their hands are on his back. Because he offers something that kind of comes through them in a way that I can hear it. But alongside him are not actually facilitators, right? Because the way I came up, he was the one.
Yeah.
Right. So I had a lovely friendship with Mark Wallin, but we learned together in some ways. Mark and I kind of grew up in the work together on some level. Think of him as almost like a, long lost brother or something. But for me, like James Baldwin, if you read James Baldwin, people think I get royalties from his books. I mention him so much. But anyway, if you read James Baldwin and you don't know who's speaking, you would think it was some fantastic facilitator, because his attention to inclusion, his attention to the hardest things in the world to be and do in everyday life are just so graceful and so gritty and so beautiful. So I would say James Baldwin, I would say Walt Whitman, I would say Virginia Satir, if we want the kind of more therapy world. She's very important to me. Erickson, Jeff Zeig, my modern dance teacher, Bertram Ross, when I was 14. All these people are the reason that I have any kind of repertoire, right? So, right, I feel like people are complex. I have to come to them with a whole palette of colors, not just one. And so, it's like I remember, Tracy, more and more teachers as time goes on and as I need them in a way.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just me. It can't just be me. Right?
Yeah. In many ways, they teach us in ways that we don't recognize at the time too. Right?
That's right. Or don't know how to appreciate, or too egotistical to admit, or something.
Yeah. And then we grow up, or we get a little bit wiser.
Yeah, if we're lucky. Some of us gather years, but not wisdom, I think.
That's true.
I try to do a little of both. least.
Oh, thank you, Suzi. I know we're coming to the end of our conversation here. Is there anything else that you'd like to just to share with the listeners and the viewers before we sign off?
It's funny, like, things are like rushing to get up, like, oh, this, that. I think I'll just stick with the simplest thing, because we talked about Bert a lot, and I don't talk about him that much. I love the opportunity to. And I think that, one of the sort of central experiences that I had of Bert, which I now have of myself, is to be the forever student, and to, one of the beautiful things that I saw him do, and it's one of the things that I think Constellation is a shelter for every wisdom tradition that anybody has ever heard of, right?
Yeah.
And so, Bert quoted Rilke and Jesus and Freud and Satir, and right. And so for me, what I am relentlessly, I use the word optimistic. It's different than positive. I'm quite aware of the hell we are in right now.
Mm.
And yet, I feel the optimism of continuing to gather and to learn. And I think that's something that he really introduced to me. So I sort of leave people with that where we can't fix, we can continue to be curious. We need to stay curious.
Yeah, which has such lovely soft edges to it, doesn't it? To be curious.
That's right. That's right.
Because
It's
there's
like
that expansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Suzi. So it's been a pleasure to have you chat here, and I'd love to have you on again sometime in the future.
Just call me.
Yeah.
Just call me. I'll be here.
And for anyone who's interested in working with Suzi or seeing what Suzi's up to, go to her website, suzitucker.com, correct?
Easy as that.
Yes.
Correct.
Easy as that. Exactly.
Beautiful.
It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I love that you invited me, and I am honored to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've been admiring your blinds in the background. They remind me of Salt Lamp. Do you know the salt lamp that you put the bulb in and they glow? Yeah. Feels like you've got two giant salt lamps supporting you in the background.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Till soon.
Thank you for listening. Head over to Instagram and tell me what's resonated for you with this episode. You'll find me at tracy.cartwright. That's Tracy with no E. .cartwright. Or head over to my website, tracycartwright.co.nz, and receive a free audio with the gift from your ancestors. So until next time, be kind to yourself and have fun doing it.